Hello there, welcome to Travel with Smiley. We're on a road trip today. It's kind of a new show called All in a Day, where you can drive someplace, see the attraction, and be back at your home in the same day. Join us now as we go up to Owl's Head, Maine from the Portland area. It's about a 2-hour drive, and we're going to go to the famous Owl's Head Museum. Let's get started. Follow me. As you're passing through Waldoboro on Route 1 North, make sure you stop in and have some food at the famous Moody's Diner on the side of Route 1 since 1927. Welcome to the Owl's Head Transportation Museum, right by the Knox County Airport near Thomaston, Maine. We're right off Route 73. Let's go inside and see all the antique autos, airplanes, and motorcycles that they have on display. Come on. First up, let's go inside and check out the engine room. Inside the engine room here at the Owl's Head Transportation Museum, they actually have motors and engines that actually operate. They have on display this 1933 Chevrolet Cutaway engine that was on display at the 1939 World's Fair held in Flushing, New York. By cutting away the sides of the engine, you can see all the inner workings of this Chevrolet engine. Here's a display of the Vonkel engine, a rotary engine. Rotary engines found widespread use in fighter aircraft in World War I. In this unusual engine, the cylinders rotate along with the propeller, while the crankshaft remains fixed. We've left the front of the engine off with the valve operating mechanism to permit viewing the operation of the pistons. This Wright Cyclone R2600 14-cylinder 2-row engine was first manufactured in 1937 by the Curtiss Wright Engine Company. Horsepower was increased to 1900 at takeoff by 1945. This 1,950-pound engine was used in the following aircraft: the Boeing 314 Clipper, the Curtiss Helldiver, the Douglas B-23 and A-20 Grumman Avenger, the Martin PBM Mariner and A-30 Baltimore, as well as the North American B-25 Mitchell and Vultee A-35 Vengeance. This is the Wasp Major R4360 Pratt & Whitney 28-cylinder engine used in the B-36s. This is the H-4 Hercules, powered by 8 of these Pratt & Whitney 4360 28-cylinder engines. Here's the Convair B-36D. This was powered by the 6 Pratt & Whitney 4360 engines. The B-36 on top of the Pratt & Whitney engines had 4 General Electric jet engines on it. Its wingspan was 230 feet. The jet was 163 feet long, and its maximum speed was 439 miles per hour. It had a range of 7,500 miles with 10,000 pounds of bombs on board. The J-33 turbojet was originally developed by the General Electric Company for the Lockheed P-80 Shooting Star. The J-33 operates on the same principle as the British Whittle gas turbine of the early 1940s. After undergoing static and flight testing in 1944, development and production of the J-33 was assumed by the Allison Division of General Motors. The J-33s were used in Air Force and Navy aircraft and the Air Force's Mace, Matador, and Snark surface-to-surface missiles also. These are the Lockheed F-80 Shooting Stars. Here's a modern-day high-bypass CF6 turbofan jet engine. You'll find these on lots of wide-body aircraft today in the 21st century. You can see the fan blades. There's 38 of those total. Some 40 years after the Wright brothers gave birth to aviation, revolutionary technology came to aircraft power plants when the jet engine was introduced. Approximately 25 years after that, another revolution in aircraft propulsion technology occurred with the advent of the high-bypass turbofan engine. The engine room has many different types of engines on display. This is an 1895 Otto gasoline engine. Steam was the forerunner of the gasoline and diesel engine. Otto's four-stroke internal combustion engine made possible in the 1880s the automobile, powered flight, and the modern way of life. This is a Merlin portable steam engine from 1880. The portable steam engine was the predecessor of ground vehicles. This engine was pulled by beast of burden to the machine it was to power. Engines of this type were used to run sawmills, threshing machines, and agricultural implements. In 1895, Simpson-Denison steam launch engine. This example of a twin-cylinder reversing steam engine is typically used to propel steam cars such as the Stanley and others. A chain drive connected the rear wheels to the engine sprocket. Here we have the coreless steam engine. It was a 600 horsepower, 70-ton, 16-foot flywheel Harris coreless engine manufactured in Providence, Rhode Island in 1882. The coreless engine provided the power for industry during the middle and late 19th century in our state of Maine. Steam drove lumber mills, clothespin factories, shoe production plants, stone quarries, and machine shops. Steam engines started the Industrial Revolution, which brought mass production into our lives. Here's a cutaway of a cotton mill showing the coreless engine at work. Now let's go look at some of the cars and the airplanes here on exhibit at the Owl's Head Transportation Museum. The 1906 Auto Car for touring. The Auto Car Company of Ardmore, Pennsylvania built cars from 1901 to 1910. From 1911 they only manufactured trucks. The shaft drive was introduced to replace the chain and sprocket power transfer, which had been proven unsuccessful. This is a Model Type 12. Price new was $2,600. It's 4 cylinders, 24 horsepower. In 1885, Carl Benz designed and built the first successful vehicle powered by an internal combustion gasoline engine. It has a number of features still found in automobiles today. A water-cooled engine, electric ignition, mechanically operated inlet valves, and differential gear on the rear end. The engine horizontal was a 4-cycle, single-cylinder, water-cooled bore was 116 millimeters, the stroke was 160 millimeters, and its displacement was 1600 cc's. This is a gasoline-fueled 3/4 horsepower engine. Steering was by hand lever with the pointer on it. The steamer Penobscot leaving Rockland, Maine. Now, as we enter into the main part of the museum, you see a really large collection of automobiles, airplanes, and motorcycles from many different years. This is a 1941 Harley-Davidson EL with a sidecar. In 1936, Harley-Davidson introduced its twin V overhead valve engines to the public. Formerly reserved strictly for racing motorcycles, this engine impressed customers with its ability to handle heavier loads and withstand higher temperatures. Bikes fitted with this engine are known as knuckleheads due to the fact that the cover of the valve mechanisms resembles the knuckles of the hand. While a sidecar model was offered in 1941, the ES, this example, was fitted with a sidecar after purchase. The EL Super Sport Solo with sidecar is 40 horsepower, 61 cubic inch twin 5 overhead valve engine. This 1932 Harley-Davidson was a side valve VL introduced in 1930. It still employed total loss lubrication. It was superseded in 1936 by the dry sump UL model. The UL line was almost indestructible and was popular with police forces. Unable to sustain the high speed of the comparable Indian Chief, UL still set many distance speed records as sidecar machines. This 1931 Henderson from the Henderson Motorcycle Company of Detroit, Michigan, produced one of the more sophisticated machines of the period. The inline engine gave smooth, quiet, vibrationless power. Here's a 1919 Harley-Davidson, the J model twin, produced from 1910 until 1929. It was so successful that there was nearly a dealer revolt when it was discontinued because of the manufacturing costs. It averaged 80 miles per hour on 300-mile road races. Racing versions pulled 55 horsepower from the 61 cubic inch engine in 1915. A Toon J set a record of 103 miles per hour at Daytona in 1920. This motorcycle represents the last of the inline four-cylinder era in America. The Indian 4 is a result of buying out production rights of the Henderson Ace of the 20s. Let's go back a century ago to Kitty Hawk, 1903. The Wright brothers first flew 101 years ago, an airplane at Kitty Hawk. Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, December 17, 1903 at 10:35 a.m. The first flight by Wilbur and Orville Wright. Orville Wright became the first man to achieve controlled, sustained flight in a powered, heavier-than-air aircraft. It was a flight of 120 feet in 12 seconds. This replica was built by the museum volunteers and staff following plans from the National Air and Space Museum. Its wingspan is 40 feet 4 inches. The plane is 21 feet long. It weighed 605 pounds without the pilot. The engine was 12 horsepower. A Wright four-cylinder, horizontal inline water-cooled engine. Its speed was 31 miles per hour. The wheel was mankind's greatest invention. The first wheels, it seems likely that the first individual wheels were sections of tree trunks with a hole burned in the center to take the axle that would have been fashioned from a smaller tree. This allowed the wheels to rotate differentially, making cornering much easier. The first known wheels dates from the 4th millennium BC and were found in Mesopotamia, the present-day Iraq. The Sumerians from that region were probably the first to use the wheel to its greatest advantage. Their wheels were simple 3 planks of wood connected with bronze pegs and strengthened with a metal band or tire. Later, the solid wheel was hollowed out for lightness and later constructed rather than carved with spokes. Early wheels, more and more, they became constructed rather than modified found objects. The components related better to each other, to axles and to the carts and chariots they were designed to service. Metal tires protected the vulnerable wood. Spokes carried the load from rim to hub more efficiently and gradually became more ornate as the vehicles reflected their function and the status of their owners. Spoked wheels and tensioned spokes. As the design of wheels developed, more was achieved with less material. The craftsmanship of the wheelwright became a symbol of elegance and good taste. The spokes of the wheel of the racing sulky maximized the ratio of weight to strength. The invention of the pneumatic rubber tire by John Dunlop in 1887 allowed an entirely new approach to the design of wheels. Developed by him for bicycles, it quickly became standard for cars, trucks, and all road vehicles. Without the tire on its metal rim, the automobile and airplane would have been developed very differently. Our life today is dependent on wheels. They come in all manner of form and size, performing many functions, and are in constant state of design and development. Enormous wheels carry earth movers and giant airliners. Small wheels allow the recreational pleasures of rollerblades and skateboards, and millions of automobiles on their rubber-tired wheels give us a degree of personal transportation and mobility that we enjoy today. In the beginning, first we walked, then we rode animals, pulled heavy loads on primitive wheels, and harnessed oxen and horses to carts and carriages. This is the 1898 Chase Recording Alarm Compass. The invention of this one-of-a-kind technological piece was inspired by the loss of the Boston steamship City of Columbus. 101 lives were lost in an accident attributed to reckless steering while the captain slept on a clear winter's night. To prevent future losses of life, Boston inventor Henry Chase created the recording alarm compass. This apparatus uses a clock, compass, and recording mechanism not only to record a ship's course, but also to sound an alarm if the ship deviates from its intended course. The machine was kept in operation by winding a motor once a day and dry cell batteries sufficient to operate continuously for over a year. The record roll held enough paper to record for several months. This historic device represents Wright brothers' era technology that was ahead of its time. Edison had just harnessed electricity a few years earlier, and navigation at the time consisted of stars, landmarks, depth soundings, charts, buoys, lighthouses, and taffrail logs. This was the launching of the schooner John Caldwell, built at Cobb, Butler and Company Builders in Rockland, Maine. Schooners and yachts like this use the 1897 Hirschoff triple expansion steam engine. This was the Eastern Steamship Company's SS Camden. The introduction of the steam turbine engine heralded a new era in nautical transportation. Period technology had previously limited speeds of reciprocating engine-powered ships to 31 to 32 knots. With the advent of the steam turbine, speeds were instantly raised significantly. Steam turbines had been introduced to American shipbuilding in 1905 with a Navy contract at the Bath Iron Works. This is the SS Belfast. Each of these ships, the Belfast and the Camden, required 27 months of sporadic construction that ended in 1909. Each ship cost in excess of $395,000 to build and boasted berths for 135 men and 76 women in addition to 204 staterooms. Both ships made 3 trips weekly between Boston and Bangor, Maine. The 18-hour overnight trip included stops at Rockland, Northport, Belfast, Searsport, Bucksport, and Winterport. During World War I, both were used on the Metropolitan line between Boston and New York. In 1936, both ships left Maine and were renamed. World War II saw both ships used for transport duty in the Hawaiian Islands. Belfast was lost off the coast of Astoria, Oregon in 1947 when she broke loose from her tow and washed ashore, a total loss. These 2 ships were 320 feet long with 4,000 horsepower steam turbine engines. A century ago, there were only 8,000 cars in the U.S. There are only 144 miles of paved roads in the United States. A Packard is the first automobile to drive from California to New York in 52 days. Harley-Davidson and Ford Motor Company are founded. That's the way it was a century ago. We're at the Owlhead Transportation Museum in Owlhead, Maine. They have a really large collection of cars, motorcycles, and antique planes. This 1906 black motor buggy built in Chicago produced high wheelers under the name of the Chicago Motor Buggy from about 1906 until 1909. A transition design taken from the horse-drawn buggy. The high wheeler pleased people who were accustomed to carriage design. This is a runabout. The engine was a 2-cylinder, horizontal opposed, air-cooled, 3 3/4 inch. The bore was 4 1/8 inches stroke. The displacement was 100.2 cubic inches. Had 12 horsepower. Price new was about $400. Here's a 1904 Stanley Model C runabout. This was a 1903 Mercedes Simplex Tourer. It was built the year of the Wright brothers' historic flight. Power was transmitted by sprocket and chain. It was run on gasoline with 44 horsepower. Here's a 1902 Curve Dash Olds. This 1912 Woods Electric Brougham was run off electricity stored in batteries under the hood and in the trunk. Pretty comfortable looking seats inside. There's the storage batteries to run this car on electricity back in 1902. It's a 1926 Ford Model T snowmobile. 1930 Ford Model A pickup. It's a 1946 Ford 1-ton express body. This is a 1937 Ford stake body 1.5-ton truck. Here's a horse-drawn carriage to deliver the mail on a rural route probably over a century ago. Looked like it was designed for winter operation. It's got the sleds on it. Just a few years later, luxury for the delivery mailman. A 1931 Ford Model A mail truck. Has the "I want you" for the U.S. Army recruiting poster on the side of it. A 1909 Chase Model D used by W.F. Blaisdell Plumbing and Heating Company. 1907 was the first year that trucks were featured on the first floor of the Grand Central Palace Auto Show in New York. Previously, they had been relegated to the basement. In 1907, U.S. production of trucks was 1,000 units. The Chase utilizes an air cooling system similar to that utilized on the water-cooled 1912 Fiat runabout in the collection. A belly pan under the engine extends to the flywheel fan, which blows the exhaust out, while at the same time sucking in air to cool the cylinders. In the Fiat, the air is pulled in through the radiator to cool thusly. Had to crank this baby up to get it started. Here we have a 1910 Buick stake bed delivery truck. 1910 was the year America and La France introduced their fire engine. Production of trucks doubled nationwide from 3,000 in 1909 to 6,000 in 1910. Pneumatic tires were standard on the Buick, but solid rubber tires could be ordered. The choice of solid tires reflects the condition of roads in the state of Maine at the time. The R4 was introduced in 1910. It was inspired by Ford's Model T, which showed Ransom E. Olds that his company needed to produce a 4-cylinder vehicle. 1916 was the last year the Ford Model T made truck conversions available from passenger cars. Starting in 1917, Ford produced a 1-ton dedicated truck chassis. This was the 1916 Rio the 5th. The good old dependable Ford Jeep in 1945, developed after World War II. With the naval base located in Owl's Head for World War II training operations, the Jeep plays an especially important role in Maine's transportation history. The Jeep was a World War II equivalent of the Model T Ford, and fittingly, Ford produced a large portion of the Jeeps. Prior to U.S. engagement in World War II, contracts were solicited from 135 manufacturers. Only Bantam and Willis Overland replied in time. Willis Overland went on to secure the lion's share of production, with Ford taking a close second. The origin of the name Jeep has a variety of versions. One states that the vehicle was named after the character in Popeye, the Jeep, who can magically be anywhere at any time. This version of the story is very fitting to the noble Jeep, which did indeed seem to be capable of being anywhere at any time. It was also capable of moving almost anything, anywhere. The Jeep proved itself to be the utilitarian as another Ford product, the Model T. And just like the Model T, when Jeeps were no longer engaged in the original function, they were turned into something else: tractor, snowplow, or power plant for equipment. This varied use makes restoration of Jeeps difficult, as it is increasingly challenging to find Jeeps that have not been tampered with due to their utility. Here's an example of a piano delivery wagon, horse-drawn, a 1927 Ford Model T produce truck, a Hood milk wagon, horse-drawn. They even had a milk delivery sleigh. This looks like the milk truck that delivered it to our doorstep when I was just a young child. This is a 1938 Divco twin milk truck. It's a Standard Oil delivery wagon. 1928 Ford Model A Racer. A 1916 Ford Speedster. A 1907 Cadillac Runabout. This is an 1850 Racing Sulky. 1903 Prescott Steam Car. 1957 Ford Thunderbird Convertible. A 1937 Hudson. An Auburn 1935 851 Speedster, convertible. (1928) Mercedes-Benz Type S. (1930) Ford Model A Roadster. 1932 Chevrolet. 1948 Playboy. The Playboy Motor Car Corporation was founded in Buffalo, New York in 1947 by Louis Horwitz, a former Packard salesman. A 1958 BMW Isetta 300. A 1933 American Austin Roadster. A 1910 Simplex Runabout. A 1909 De Dion Bouton. And here's a 1901 Riker Torpedo Racer. (1965) Porsche SC Coupe. 1941 Cadillac Series 62. The Cricket 3, the car of the future. (1935) Stout Scarab. The 1917 SE5A. This is a 1916 Sopwith Pup. Triple wings. A 1965 AC Shelby Cobra. A 1965 Chevrolet Corvette. The 1941 Stearman Boeing A-75N1 Cadet. Open cockpit. (1917) Curtiss JN 4D Jenny. (1918) Standard J1 Harry Jones Flying Service. (1917) Newport 28 C1. (1912) Curtiss Model D Pusher. Thanks for joining us today on Travel with Smiley at the Owl's Head Transportation Museum. It's quite a large museum, so expect to spend most of your day here. It's open from 10 to 5, year-round. And remember, when you're traveling, to always travel safe, travel fun, travel America. Thanks for joining us, and see you next time on Travel with Smiley.